The blood on the ledger made Colt Chambers realize he had finally reached his limit, though it was his own blood from a split knuckle where he had punched the barn wall in frustration, rather than anything more sinister. It was May of 1873, and his ranch outside Hangtown, California, was bleeding money faster than a stuck pig, though Colt could not make sense of the columns and numbers to figure out exactly where or why. He sat in his ranch house office, surrounded by 3 years' worth of receipts, invoices, and scrawled notes that might as well have been written in Chinese for all the sense they made to him. Colt was good with cattle, good with horses, good with a rope and a rifle. He could track a missing steer across 20 miles of rough country and judge the weight of a bull within 10 pounds just by looking. But numbers on paper, they might as well have been rattlesnakes for how much he wanted to avoid them. His foreman, Pete, had been after him for months to hire someone to sort out the books. The ranch was profitable. Colt knew that much, but he had no idea how profitable or whether he was paying too much for feed or getting cheated by the buyers who came through. His father had kept immaculate records before the fever took him 2 years back, but Colt had let things slide, focusing on the work he understood while the paperwork piled up like drifts of snow. The problem was that Hangtown was not exactly overflowing with accountants or bookkeepers. The gold rush had ended years ago, and most folks who remained were miners scraping by, merchants, saloon keepers, or ranchers like himself. Anyone with real education usually headed to Sacramento or San Francisco, where the money was better and life was easier. Colt wrapped his bleeding knuckle in a handkerchief and walked outside into the bright spring sunshine. His ranch sprawled across 500 acres of good grazing land, with the Sierra Nevada mountains rising purple and magnificent to the east. He had 200 head of cattle, 30 horses, a dozen hands, and a future that should have been secure. Instead, he felt like he was walking a tightrope in the dark, never sure if the next step would find solid ground. "Boss, you get those books figured out?" Pete called from the corral where he was working with a young mare. "Not yet," Colt admitted, walking over to lean against the fence. Pete was 15 years older, weathered as old leather, and had been with the Chambers family since Colt was in short pants. "You know what you need to do," Pete said, not looking up from the horse. "I know," Colt sighed. "I just do not know where to find someone, could ask in town, put up a notice or something." That afternoon, Colt rode into Hangtown, such as it was. The town had shrunk considerably since its glory days, when thousands of miners had swarmed the hills looking for gold. Now it was down to maybe 300 permanent residents, with one main street of businesses, a church, a schoolhouse, and scattered houses and shacks spreading up the hillsides. He tied his horse outside the general store and went in to find old Mrs. Patterson behind the counter. "Afternoon, Colt. What brings you to town midweek? Need to put up a notice. Looking to hire someone to help with ranch bookkeeping. You know anyone who might be interested, Mrs.?" Patterson pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Most folks who can cipher that well already have employment. You might try the schoolhouse. Miss Taylor there, she is good with numbers, teaches the older children arithmetic and such. A schoolteacher," Colt frowned. "Would she have time?" "Well, school lets out for summer in 2 weeks. Could not hurt to ask. She rooms at the Hendersons' place, just up the hill past the church." Colt thanked her and headed back out into the afternoon sun. He had seen the schoolteacher around town a few times but never paid much attention. Teaching was women's work, generally done by spinsters or young ladies waiting to get married. The fact that she was still teaching suggested she was either unmarried or widowed. The Henderson house was a neat white cottage with a small garden in front. Colt knocked and waited, hat in hand. "Mrs. Henderson," answered, a plump woman in her 50s with a friendly face. "Mr. Chambers, what a surprise. What can I do for you?" "I am looking for Miss Taylor, madam. Mrs. Patterson suggested she might be able to help me with some bookkeeping work." "Oh, how wonderful." Emma could certainly use the extra income. "Come in, come in. She is just finishing up some lesson planning in her room. I will fetch her." Colt stepped into the tidy parlor and waited, turning his hat in his hands. He heard light footsteps on the stairs, and then Emma Taylor appeared in the doorway. She was not what he expected. For some reason, he had pictured a severe woman with gray hair and spectacles. Instead, Emma Taylor looked to be in her mid-20s, with chestnut hair pulled back in a simple bun and intelligent hazel eyes that regarded him with curiosity. She was pretty in an understated way, wearing a plain blue dress that suggested practicality rather than fashion. "Mr. Chambers," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Mrs. Henderson said you wanted to speak with me about bookkeeping." "Yes, madam. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of town, and I am afraid I have let the books get into quite a state. I need someone who can make sense of the finances, set up a proper system, and maybe teach me enough that I do not make such a mess of it again. Mrs. Patterson said you were good with numbers." Emma smiled slightly. "I teach arithmetic, among other subjects. I have also kept books for my father's store back in Ohio before I came west. What exactly are we talking about in terms of work?" "Honestly, Miss Taylor, I am not even sure. 3 years of receipts and records that need sorting, setting up a proper ledger system, figuring out where the money is going and whether I am getting fair prices on my purchases and sales. I would pay fair wages, of course." 3 years. Emma's eyebrows rose. "That is quite a backlog." "I know. My father used to handle it all, but since he passed, I have been putting it off. I am good with cattle, terrible with numbers." Emma was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking it through. Finally, she said, "School finishes in 2 weeks. I would have the whole summer free. I suppose I could take a look at what you have and give you an estimate of how much work is involved and what I would charge." "That would be much appreciated, Miss Taylor. When would be convenient?" "Saturday afternoon. I could ride out to your ranch and assess the situation." "Saturday is perfect. I will have one of my hands meet you at the edge of town to escort you out. The road is easy enough to follow, but I would feel better knowing you had company." "That is thoughtful, thank you. Shall we say 2 o'clock?" They settled the details, and Colt left feeling like maybe, just maybe, he had found a solution to at least one of his problems. As he rode back to the ranch, he found himself thinking about Emma Taylor. There was something capable and self-assured about her that he found appealing. She had not simpered or acted coy, just assessed the situation practically and made a decision. That kind of straightforward behavior was rare enough in his experience. Saturday dawned clear and warm, the kind of day that made Colt grateful he lived in California rather than back east. He sent his youngest hand, Tommy, into town to meet Miss Taylor and bring her out to the ranch, while he spent the morning in a panic trying to organize his office so it looked at least marginally less like a disaster. He had just given up and shoved a stack of papers into a drawer when he heard horses in the yard. Through the window, he saw Tommy helping a woman down from a neat bay mare. Emma Taylor had changed from her town dress into a more practical riding outfit in dark brown, and she carried a leather satchel that presumably held whatever tools of the trade a bookkeeper might need. Colt went out to meet her. "Miss Taylor, welcome to the Chambers Ranch. I hope the ride out was pleasant." "Very much so. It is beautiful country." She looked around at the ranch buildings, the corrals, the grazing cattle in the distance. "You have a substantial operation here." "It is a good place," Colt agreed. "My grandfather started it back in '51, right after the gold rush brought folks west. He figured feeding people was more reliable than hunting for gold, and he was right. "Come on inside, and I will show you what I am dealing with." He led her into the house, which was solidly built but clearly lacking a woman's touch. The furniture was functional rather than decorative, and dust collected in corners that no one quite got around to sweeping. Emma did not comment, just followed him into the office. When he opened the door, he heard her draw in a sharp breath. "Oh my, I know it is bad," Colt said, feeling heat rise in his face. "It is not bad, it is just substantial." Emma set down her satchel and moved to the desk, picking up one stack of papers and leafing through them. "These are all unsorted, mostly. Some of them are grouped by month maybe, or by vendor. I was not always consistent." Emma was quiet for a long moment, examining various stacks and piles. Finally, she turned to face him. "Mr. Chambers, I am going to be honest with you. This is going to take the entire summer, possibly longer. We are talking about reconstructing 3 years of financial records from scratch. That is a major undertaking." Colt's heart sank. "I understand if you do not want to take it on." "I did not say that." Emma met his eyes steadily. "I can do it, but it will require regular work sessions, possibly several days a week. And you are going to need to be involved, at least initially, because I will have questions about transactions that only you can answer." "Are you prepared for that commitment?" "Yes, madam. Whatever it takes." "Then I will need workspace. This desk will do, but I will need you to clear out somewhere I can work undisturbed. I will also need your cooperation in answering questions promptly, even when you are busy with ranch work. And I will need access to any financial documents you might have stored elsewhere, bank statements, contracts, anything related to the ranch finances." "You can have whatever you need." Emma nodded. "Then I will take the job. As for payment, given the scope of the work, I propose a flat rate for the summer, payable in 3 installments. Does $50 seem fair?" Colt blinked. That was more than fair, it was practically robbery in the other direction. A bookkeeper in Sacramento would charge 3 times that for this kind of work. "Miss Taylor, that seems too low for the amount of work involved." "Mr. Chambers, I am a schoolteacher, not a professional accountant. $50 is more than I make in a summer normally, and the work will give me something productive to do. Besides, I am curious now. I want to see if we can solve your mystery." "Mystery? Whether you are making money or losing it, that is a mystery worth solving." Her smile was genuine, and Colt found himself smiling back. "Then I accept your terms. When can you start?" "Monday, if that suits you. I will come out after breakfast and work until afternoon. We can adjust the schedule once I get a better sense of the work." They spent another hour going over the basics of what she would need, and then Colt walked her back out to her horse. "Thank you for taking this on, Miss Taylor. I know it is a mess. Every problem has a solution, Mr. Chambers. We just have to find it." She swung up into the saddle with practiced ease, settling her skirts. "I will see you Monday." Colt watched her ride off, Tommy following at a respectful distance to see her safely back to town. Pete wandered over from the barn, a knowing look on his weathered face. "Pretty girl," Pete observed. "She is a bookkeeper," Colt said firmly. "She is a pretty bookkeeper, and you could do worse, boss. Smart woman like that could be good for this place." "Pete, I just hired her to fix my books, nothing else." "If you say so." Pete did not sound convinced. Monday morning arrived too quickly, or not quickly enough. Colt was not sure which. He found himself restless, checking the road to town more often than necessary. He told himself it was just because he was anxious about the books, but Pete's raised eyebrow when Colt changed shirts before lunch suggested otherwise. Emma arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, riding alone this time. Colt hurried out to meet her, earning another knowing look from Pete. Miss Taylor, you should have sent word. I would have had someone escort you. That is kind but unnecessary. It is broad daylight and the road is well traveled. Besides, I grew up on a farm. I am quite comfortable on horseback. She dismounted and retrieved her satchel from the saddle bag. Shall we begin? Colt got her settled in the office with a pot of coffee and some paper for notes, then hovered uncertainly in the doorway. Is there anything else you need? Just answers when I have questions, Emma said, already sorting papers into stacks. Otherwise, I imagine you have ranch work to attend to. Yes, madam. I will be around, though, if you need me. He left her to it and went out to help with the day's work, but found his thoughts drifting back to the house where Emma Taylor was systematically organizing 3 years of chaos. At lunch, he brought sandwiches to the office and found her surrounded by neat stacks of papers, each labeled with a piece of scrap paper. "How is it going?" he asked, setting a plate beside her. "Better than expected, actually. You are more organized than you think. Your receipts are dated and your handwriting is legible. The problem is not that you kept bad records, just that you never compiled them into a formal system." She accepted the sandwich gratefully. "Thank you. I was so focused I forgot about lunch. What have you found so far?" "Mostly that you spend a lot on feed in the winter months, which makes sense, and that you had some significant medical expenses 2 years ago. What happened?" "My father's illness. He was sick for 3 months before he died. The doctor came out from town twice a week, and we tried every treatment we could afford." Emma's expression softened. "I am sorry. That must have been very difficult." "It was. He was a good man and a better rancher than I will ever be." "I doubt that. This ranch is thriving from what I can see. You just need to get the paperwork to match the reality." They ate in companionable silence, and Colt found himself studying Emma when she was not looking. She had ink smudges on her fingers and a small crease between her eyebrows when she concentrated. Her hair was coming loose from its bun in soft tendrils that framed her face. She was, he realized, quite lovely, though in a different way than the saloon girls or the fancy ladies who sometimes passed through Hangtown. "You are staring," Emma said without looking up from the paper she was examining. Colt felt heat flood his face. "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" Now she did look up, her hazel eyes curious. "About how grateful I am that you took this job. I was worried I would never find anyone who could make sense of this mess." "Well, it is a good thing Mrs. Patterson recommended me then." Emma smiled. "Though I have to admit, I was skeptical when you first approached me. I wondered if you were really serious about fixing the problem, or just looking for someone to blame when things went wrong. What changed your mind? The fact that you admitted you did not understand it. A lot of men would have pretended they had everything under control or blamed the mess on someone else. You were honest about needing help. That takes courage. Or desperation," Colt said wryly. "Maybe both." Emma finished her sandwich and brushed crumbs from her fingers. "Now, I have some questions about these entries from last spring. There are several large payments to someone named McAllister. Who is that?" They spent the next hour going through various transactions, with Emma asking pointed questions and Colt doing his best to remember details from months or years past. It was tedious work, but Emma had a way of making it feel more like solving a puzzle than drudgery. By the time she packed up to leave that afternoon, Colt felt something he had not felt in months: hope. Maybe his finances were not the disaster he had feared. Maybe with Emma's help, he could get the ranch on solid footing. "Same time tomorrow?" Emma asked as he walked her to her horse. "If that works for you. And Miss Taylor, thank you, not just for the work but for being patient with my questions. That is part of the job, Mr. Chambers. Besides, it is your money and your ranch. You should understand where it is all going." The days fell into a pattern after that. Emma would arrive mid-morning and work through early afternoon, breaking for lunch with Colt. They would discuss the books, but increasingly, their conversations drifted to other topics. Emma told him about growing up in Ohio, the youngest daughter of a shopkeeper with 5 children. She had come west 3 years ago, wanting adventure and independence, and found both in Hangtown. Though I will admit, teaching school in a mining town was not quite the adventure I imagined, she said with a laugh one afternoon. Half my students only attend when they feel like it, and the other half are more interested in getting outside than learning their lessons. Do you regret coming? Colt asked. Emma considered the question seriously. No, I like the independence. Back home, my family would have been pressuring me to marry, to settle down and have children. Here, I can make my own choices, earn my own money. That is worth something. You do not want to marry. I did not say that. Emma met his eyes steadily. I just want to marry for the right reasons, not because it is expected or convenient. Does that make sense? It does, Colt said quietly. My father used to say that a marriage should be a partnership, not a prison sentence. Both people should want to be there. Your father sounded like a wise man. He was. As the weeks passed, Colt found himself looking forward to Emma's visits with an eagerness that had nothing to do with bookkeeping. He started finding excuses to spend more time in the office, helping her sort papers or explaining various aspects of ranch operation. Emma seemed to welcome his company, and their conversation flowed easily, shifting from business to personal topics and back again without awkwardness. Pete noticed, of course. You are spending an awful lot of time on those books, boss, he observed one evening after Emma had left. She needs my input, Colt said defensively. Uh-huh. And you need to change into a clean shirt every time she shows up because, Pete, drop it. I am just saying, it has been a long time since I have seen you smile this much. She is good for you. Colt wanted to argue, but he could not. The truth was, Emma had become the bright spot in his days. He found himself thinking about her when he was checking the cattle or mending fence, wondering what she was doing, whether she was finding more chaos in his records, or whether she was smiling that particular smile she got when she figured something out. It was toward the end of June when Emma made a discovery that changed everything. Colt was in the barn when he heard her call his name, her voice urgent enough that he dropped what he was doing and ran to the house. What is wrong? He asked, bursting into the office. Emma was standing at the desk, holding 2 ledgers side by side. Her expression was troubled. Colt, I need you to look at something. These entries here from last year. You have payments going out to someone named Harrison for hay delivery, but look at the amounts. Colt leaned over to see where she was pointing. The entries showed regular payments, usually around $20 per delivery. That looks right, he said. Harrison has a farm up north. We buy hay from him in the winter. Now look at this. Emma opened the other ledger, which was an old one of his father's from 5 years earlier. These are payments to Harrison from when your father was managing the books. Same quantity of hay, similar delivery schedule. But look at the amounts. Colt's stomach dropped as he saw the numbers. His father had paid $12 per delivery for the same quantity. That is a big difference. Nearly double Colt. And it is not just Harrison. Look at these entries for horseshoes, for the farrier, for dry goods. You are paying significantly more than your father did for the same services. Maybe prices have gone up, some certainly, but not this much, not across the board. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. I think someone has been taking advantage of you, multiple people actually. Colt felt a wave of anger wash over him, followed quickly by shame. People had been cheating him, probably for years, and he had been too ignorant or too trusting to notice. I am a fool. You are not a fool. You are someone who was grieving his father and trying to run a ranch without help. People saw an opportunity and took it. That says everything about them and nothing about you. What do? We need to verify the actual market prices for these goods and services. Then you need to have some conversations with your suppliers. Some of them might have legitimate reasons for the price increases. Others might not. Over the next few days, Emma helped Colt compile a list of discrepancies and research the going rates for various goods and services. The picture that emerged was not pretty. Some vendors had raised prices modestly, which was reasonable. But others, including Harrison, had been overcharging significantly, apparently betting that the grieving son would not notice or question it. The confrontations were not pleasant. Harrison got defensive, then angry, claiming his prices were fair. When Colt showed him the documentation Emma had prepared, comparing prices from other suppliers, the farmer backed down and agreed to either lower his prices or lose Colt's business. The farrier, an older man named Wilson, was more contrite. "I am sorry, son. I knew I was charging you more than I charged your father, but you never questioned it, so I figured you were good for it. I will adjust my prices going forward." By early July, Emma had straightened out the worst of the problems and set up a new bookkeeping system that even Colt could understand. More importantly, she had saved the ranch hundreds of dollars per year by identifying the overcharges. "You have been worth every penny and more," Colt told her one afternoon as they reviewed the new ledgers. "I cannot thank you enough. I am glad I could help." Emma's smile was warm, but there was something wistful in it. "Though I have to admit, I will miss coming out here. It has been the best part of my summer." Colt's heart gave an odd lurch. In his focus on the books and the overcharges, he had not thought about what would happen when the work was done. Emma would go back to teaching, and he would go back to running the ranch, and their daily meetings would end. "Emma," he said, then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. She looked up at him, her hazel eyes questioning. They were sitting close together at the desk, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her irises, close enough that it would take almost nothing to lean forward and kiss her. "Emma," he said again, his voice rougher than he intended. "These past weeks, getting to know you, they have meant more to me than I know how to say. I do not want this to end just because the books are finished." "What are you saying?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I am saying that I look forward to seeing you every day. I am saying that you make me laugh and you challenge me to be better. I am saying that somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, and I do not want you to ride back to town today and have that be the end of things." Emma's eyes widened. "Colt, I know I am not much of a catch. I am a rancher who cannot keep his own books and who let himself get cheated for years. I do not have fancy manners or education. But I can promise you this. If you would consider letting me court you properly, I would spend every day trying to make you happy. I would be your partner in everything, just like you have been mine these past weeks." Emma was quiet for a long moment, and Colt's heart sank. He had misread the situation, mistaken her professional friendliness for something more. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Colt, you are the most honorable man I have ever met. You are honest and hardworking and kind. You do not need to apologize for what you are or what you know. And for the record, I have been hoping you would say something like this for weeks." "You have. Of course I have." "Why do you think I kept finding reasons to extend the project?" Emma laughed, a sound like music. "I sorted out your basic accounting in the first 2 weeks. Everything after that I was dragging out because I wanted an excuse to keep seeing you." Colt felt like his chest might burst. "You mean it?" "I mean it. I would very much like for you to court me, Colt Chambers. In fact, I would like that more than just about anything." He kissed her then, leaning across the desk scattered with ledgers and receipts, and she kissed him back with a warmth that made his head spin. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So what happens now?" Emma asked. Now I suppose I should do this properly. May I take you to dinner in town tomorrow night, and maybe for a walk afterward? I would like that very much. The next evening, Colt put on his best suit, the one he usually reserved for funerals and important business meetings, and rode into town to collect Emma. She met him at the Hendersons' house, wearing a dress he had not seen before, a soft green that brought out the color of her eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, the words feeling inadequate. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Emma replied with a smile. They had dinner at the town's only real restaurant, a small place run by a widow named Mrs. Chen who served a mix of American and Chinese food. Colt had eaten there before, but it felt different with Emma across the table, talking and laughing, their feet occasionally brushing under the table. Afterward, they walked through town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Hangtown was quiet in the evening, most folks already home for the night. They walked past the church, up the hill toward the old cemetery where some of the original 49ers were buried. "You like it here?" Colt asked. "In Hangtown, I mean, or do you miss Ohio?" "I like it," Emma said thoughtfully. "It is different from what I knew growing up, rougher, more uncertain, but there is a freedom here I never had back home. People are judged more by what they do than who their family is or how much money they have. But you are alone here, no family nearby." "I have friends. Mrs. Henderson treats me like a daughter, and the teaching, despite its challenges, is rewarding. But you are right, I do miss having family close sometimes." They reached a bench overlooking the town and sat down. In the growing darkness, the lights from houses and businesses twinkled below them. "If things work out between us," Colt said carefully, "if we were to get serious, would you want to keep teaching?" "That depends," Emma replied. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "Not yet. It is too soon. But I want to know what you want, Emma. What would make you happy?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Honestly, I think I would like to keep teaching, at least for a while. I enjoy the work and the money helps. But more than that, I want to be a partner in whatever life I build with someone. I want to contribute, to be involved. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." "My mother was the same way. She kept the books, managed the household, and still found time to help with the cattle when things got busy. My father always said she was the backbone of the ranch. They sound like they had a good marriage. They did. They were partners in every sense of the word. That is what I want too." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, and Colt wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars come out over Hangtown, neither needing to say anything more. The summer unfolded like a dream. Colt courted Emma properly, with dinners and walks and picnics in the countryside. She continued to come out to the ranch several times a week, though now it was to see him rather than to work on the books. They would ride out to check on the cattle together, or she would sit on the porch while he worked with the horses, reading aloud from whatever book she had borrowed from the tiny town library. Pete approved wholeheartedly. "Knew it from the first day," he told Colt with satisfaction. "Knew she was the one for you." "We are not engaged," Colt protested, though his heart was not in the protest. "Yet. You are not engaged yet, but you will be." Pete was right, of course. By August, Colt knew he wanted to marry Emma Taylor more than he had wanted anything in his life. The question was when and how to ask her. He finally decided on a warm evening in late August, when the air smelled of dry grass and dust, and the sun was setting over the mountains. He took Emma up to a high meadow on the ranch where his parents used to go when they wanted to be alone. The view stretched for miles in every direction, and the wildflowers still bloomed in scattered patches of color. "This is beautiful," Emma said, dismounting and walking to the edge of the meadow. "Why have you never brought me here before?" "Because it is special. My father brought my mother here when he proposed to her. I wanted to do the same." Emma turned to face him, her eyes wide. "Colt." He crossed the distance between them and took both her hands in his. "Emma Taylor, I know we have only known each other a few months. But in that time, you have become the most important person in my world. You are smart and capable and kind. You make me laugh, you challenge me, and you make every day better just by being in it. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Emma's face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He had brought his mother's ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had somehow survived 2 generations of ranch work. It fit Emma's finger perfectly, and when he slipped it on, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him so hard they both stumbled backward, laughing. "When?" Emma asked breathlessly when they finally pulled apart. "When should we get married?" "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if you like." She laughed. "I need a bit more notice than that. What about October? That would give us time to plan properly, and school will be settled into the new term by then. October is perfect." They were married on the first Saturday in October, in the little church in Hangtown with half the town in attendance. Emma wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, and Colt wore his father's wedding suit, carefully preserved all these years. Pete stood up as best man, and Mrs. Henderson was matron of honor. The ceremony was short and sweet, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Colt kissed his bride to loud cheers from the assembled crowd. They had a party afterward in the town square, with food and dancing and more celebration than Hangtown had seen in years. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Colt and Emma slipped away, riding back to the ranch in the golden evening light. They had spent the past month preparing the ranch house for Emma's arrival, painting rooms and buying new furniture, and making it feel like a real home rather than just a place for a bachelor rancher to sleep. "Welcome home, Mrs. Chambers," Colt said as he helped Emma down from her horse. "Mrs. Chambers," Emma repeated, testing the sound of it. "I like that very much." That first night as husband and wife was everything Colt had hoped and more. Emma was warm and loving, meeting his passion with her own, and they christened their marriage bed with joy and laughter, and a tenderness that brought tears to Colt's eyes. The next morning, they woke tangled together, sunlight streaming through the bedroom window. Emma stretched like a cat and smiled at him. "Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Wonderful. Happy. A little sore," she admitted with a blush. "We do not have to get up right away. Do not you have ranch work to do?" "Pete can handle things for one day. Right now, the only thing I want to do is stay right here with you." They did eventually get up, of course, and Emma dove into her new role as ranch wife with the same energy and competence she brought to everything else. She kept teaching for that school year, riding into town 3 days a week while continuing to manage the ranch books and help Colt with various aspects of running the operation. By the following summer, Emma was pregnant with their first child. Colt was terrified and thrilled in equal measure, fussing over her constantly until she finally sat him down and told him in no uncertain terms that she was not made of glass and would not break. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she said firmly. "I will be fine." "But what if something goes wrong? What if—" "Then we will deal with it together," Emma interrupted. "But worrying about what might happen is not going to help anyone. I need you to trust me, Colt." He did trust her, of course, but that did not stop him from worrying. When her time came in March of 1875, he paced the parlor while Mrs. Henderson and the doctor attended to Emma in the bedroom. The labor seemed to go on forever, and every cry of pain from Emma made him want to break down the door. Finally, after what felt like days but was probably closer to 12 hours, he heard a new sound, the sharp, indignant wail of a newborn baby. A few minutes later, Mrs. Henderson emerged smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Chambers, a healthy, strong boy, and your wife is doing just fine." Colt did not remember crossing the room, but suddenly he was in the bedroom, kneeling beside the bed where Emma lay exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly, pulling back the blanket so he could see the red, wrinkled face of his child. Colt felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is perfect. He is loud," Emma said with a tired laugh. "He has your lungs." They named the boy Charles after Colt's father. Charlie, as they quickly took to calling him, was indeed loud and demanding, keeping them up at all hours with his cries. But Colt had never been happier, watching Emma nurse their son or rock him to sleep, seeing the way she glowed with maternal pride and love. Emma stopped teaching after Charlie was born, but she continued to manage the ranch books and gradually took over more and more of the business side of the operation. She had a head for commerce that Colt lacked, and within a few years, the ranch was more profitable than it had ever been under his father's management. They added to their family over the years. A daughter named Ellen in 1877, another son they called James in 1880, and finally another daughter, Anne, in 1882. The ranch house that had once been too quiet and empty was now full of noise and life and love. Colt watched his children grow, teaching them about ranching and horses and the land, while Emma taught them reading and arithmetic, and all the things they would need to know to make their way in the world. Charlie showed early signs of wanting to follow in his father's footsteps, spending every spare moment in the barns or out with the cattle. Ellen was quieter, preferring books to horses, and Emma often said she would make a fine teacher herself someday. As the years passed, Hangtown changed too. The railroad came through in the early 80s, bringing new opportunities and new challenges. Colt and Emma adapted, finding new markets for their cattle and expanding the ranch's operations. They built a new barn, added more acres to their holdings, and became pillars of the community. Pete got older and eventually retired, though he stayed on the ranch in a small cottage Colt built for him, serving as a grandfather figure to the children and dispensing advice, whether asked for or not. On his deathbed in 1890, he took Colt's hand and said, "I told you she was the one for you. Best thing you ever did, marrying that girl." "Best thing I ever did was listen to you," Colt replied, his voice thick with emotion. Through it all, through the challenges and the triumphs, the hard years and the prosperous ones, Colt and Emma's love only deepened. They grew into their marriage the way they grew into the land, becoming more themselves even as they became more united. One evening in late summer of 1895, after the children were grown and married themselves, Colt and Emma rode up to the meadow where he had proposed all those years ago. They were both graying now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of ranch work, but their hands still fit together perfectly as they sat on a blanket and watched the sunset. "You ever regret it?" Colt asked. "Coming west, marrying me, giving up teaching?" "Never," Emma said firmly. "Not for one single moment. This life, this ranch, our children, everything we have built together, it is more than I ever dreamed of when I left Ohio." "I could not have done any of it without you," Colt said. "The ranch would have failed if you had not sorted out those books and shown me what I was doing wrong. I would have been just another failed rancher." "That is not true. You are a good rancher, Colt. You always were. You just needed help with the numbers." "No." He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "I needed help with more than the numbers. I needed someone to share the burden, to be my partner in all of this. I needed you. When I hired you to fix my books, I thought I was looking for someone to organize my finances. But what I really needed, what I was really missing, was you." Emma's eyes were bright with tears. "You old romantic. I learned from the best." He leaned over and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of all the love that had sustained them through more than 2 decades of marriage. They had 6 grandchildren by then, with more on the way. Charlie was running most of the ranch operations now, with his father serving more as an advisor than an active manager. Ellen had indeed become a teacher, married to a lawyer in Sacramento. James was learning the family business alongside his older brother, while Anne had married a shopkeeper in Placerville and seemed happy with her quieter life. As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Colt thought about the path that had brought him here. If someone had told him back in '73, when he was punching walls in frustration over ledgers he could not understand, that his incompetence with bookkeeping would lead to the greatest joy of his life, he would have laughed in disbelief. But it was true. Emma had come to his ranch to fix his books, and instead she had fixed his life. She had not just organized his finances, she had organized his heart, showing him what he had been missing without even knowing it. Not just competence or efficiency or profit margins, but partnership, companionship, love. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Just about how lucky I am. And about how a man can spend so much time looking at numbers, trying to figure out what is wrong, and completely miss what is actually missing." "And what was that?" "Everything," Colt said simply. "Before you, I had nothing that really mattered. Now I have everything." They sat together in the meadow as the stars began to appear. 2 people who had found each other against all odds in the rough country of the California foothills. A rancher who could not keep his books and a schoolteacher looking for adventure had built something neither could have created alone. A life, a family, a legacy that would outlast them both. The ranch still stood generations later, passed down through Charlie's line, a testament to what could be built when 2 people truly partnered together. But that was all in the distant future. For now, for this perfect evening in 1895, Colt and Emma were content to sit together in the meadow where their love story had truly begun, grateful for every moment, every choice, every circumstance that had brought them to this place. Colt never did get much better at bookkeeping. Oh, he learned the basics well enough under Emma's patient tutelage, but numbers never came naturally to him the way they did to her. And that was fine, because she handled that side of the ranch business with the same quiet competence she brought to everything else. They each had their strengths, and together, those strengths made them formidable. The years continued to pass gently. By the turn of the century, Colt and Emma were considered elders of Hangtown, though the town itself had changed its name to Placerville years earlier, trying to shed its rough mining camp reputation. They did not mind the change. They had seen the town grow and mature, just as they had grown and matured together. On their 30th wedding anniversary in October of 1903, their children organized a party at the ranch. All 4 came with their spouses and children, filling the house with noise and laughter. There was music and dancing and food, and speeches that made both Colt and Emma tear up. Charlie stood up to make a toast, now a man in his late 20s with children of his own. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that marriage is not just about love, though they have that in abundance. It is about partnership, about facing life together, about building something that lasts. They showed us how to be strong alone but stronger together. To Colt and Emma Chambers. The whole family echoed the toast, and Colt pulled Emma close, kissing her to cheers from their children and grandchildren. Looking around at the faces surrounding them, the family they had created together, Colt felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was what he had been missing all those years ago, though he had not known how to name it. Not just a wife or a partner, but this: a full house, a full heart, a life rich with meaning and connection. Emma had brought him all of it, starting with those first days when she sat at his desk, sorting through his chaotic records, patient and determined and completely unaware that she was sorting out far more than his finances. As night fell and the party wound down, Colt and Emma found themselves alone on the porch, watching the last of their guests depart. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars that had watched over them for 3 decades. Tired? Colt asked, wrapping a blanket around Emma's shoulders against the evening chill. Exhausted, she admitted. But it was wonderful, was it not? Seeing everyone together, seeing how our family has grown, it was perfect. You are perfect. I am not perfect, Colt Chambers, and neither are you. But we are perfect together, and that is what matters. He could not argue with that. They were far from perfect individually. He still got impatient and stubborn, still sometimes let his pride get in the way of asking for help. Emma could be inflexible and too focused on details, losing sight of the bigger picture. But together, they balanced each other out, each compensating for the other's weaknesses while celebrating their strengths. You remember that first day? Colt asked. When you came out to assess my books and I was so embarrassed by the mess. Of course I remember. I nearly turned around and rode right back to town. It looked hopeless. But you stayed. But I stayed, Emma agreed. And you know what convinced me? It was not the challenge of the work, though that was appealing. It was the look on your face. You were so earnest, so genuinely desperate for help and willing to admit you needed it. I thought any man who could set his pride aside like that was worth helping. I am glad you thought so. Otherwise, I would have gone bankrupt and probably lost the ranch within another year or 2. Maybe. Or maybe you would have figured something else out. You are resourceful, Colt, even if you do not always give yourself credit for it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped in blankets and each other's presence. After 30 years of marriage, they had learned the value of quiet moments, of simply being together without needing to fill every second with words. Finally, Emma stirred. We should go inside. It is getting cold. In a minute. Colt tightened his arm around her. I want to stay here a bit longer, just the 2 of us. You are getting sentimental in your old age, Emma teased, but she settled back against him, clearly content to stay. I have been sentimental since the day I met you. I am just getting worse at hiding it. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dry grass, the eternal smells of the California foothills. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and closer by, the horses nickered softly in their barn. These were the sounds of home, the sounds that had formed the backdrop of their entire married life. You think they will keep it going? Emma asked quietly. The children, I mean. Do you think they will keep the ranch in the family? Charlie will. He loves this place as much as I do, maybe more. And James is learning fast. Between the 2 of them, I think the ranch is in good hands. I hope so. It would be nice to think that what we built here will continue, that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren might walk this land. They will, Colt said with certainty. Because we did not just build a ranch, Emma. We built something stronger than that. We built a foundation, a legacy of love and partnership and hard work. That is not something that disappears easily. Emma turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "When did you get so wise?" "The day I married you. You have been rubbing off on me for 3 decades." She laughed and kissed him, and for a moment, they were not an old married couple in their 50s but young lovers again, full of hope and promise and endless possibility. Eventually, they did go inside, bank the fire, and make their way to the bedroom they had shared for 30 years. As Colt lay beside his wife in the darkness, listening to her breathing slowly even out into sleep, he thought again about that day so long ago, when he had punched the wall in frustration over his incomprehensible books. He had been so focused on the numbers, on the tangible problem in front of him, that he had not realized the real issue was not financial at all. He had money, he had land, he had a successful business. What he lacked was someone to share it with, someone to give it all meaning and purpose. Emma had walked into his life under the pretense of fixing his accounts, but what she had really done was fix his heart. She had shown him that the most important ledgers were not the ones that tracked dollars and cents, but the ones that measured love and partnership, and the small daily acts of kindness that built a life together. In the end, the numbers had been fine. A bit messy, a bit disorganized, but fundamentally sound. It was his life that had been the real mess, though he had not known it at the time. Emma had organized both, bringing order and beauty and meaning to every aspect of his existence. Colt drifted off to sleep with a smile on his face, his hand reaching across the bed to rest on Emma's shoulder, reassuring himself even in sleep that she was still there beside him. The years continued their steady march forward. By 1910, Colt was approaching 60, his hair completely gray and his joints aching in the morning. Emma was 57, still sharp as a tack but moving a bit slower than she used to. They had cut back on their involvement in the ranch, letting Charlie and James handle most of the work while they served in advisory roles. It was a good life in their later years. They spent their mornings having coffee on the porch, their afternoons reading or visiting with grandchildren, their evenings taking short walks around the property they had spent decades building. They were content in a way that only comes from a long life well lived and shared with someone you love. One afternoon in June of that year, Emma collapsed while working in her garden. Colt heard her cry out and ran faster than he had moved in years, his heart in his throat. He found her on the ground among the tomato plants, conscious but disoriented. "Emma, Emma, what happened?" "I do not know," she said weakly. "I just felt dizzy all of a sudden." They sent for the doctor immediately, and Colt paced the parlor like he had when Emma was in labor with their children, terrified of what he might hear. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was grave. "Her heart is weak," he said bluntly. "She has been working too hard for a woman her age. She needs complete rest, no strenuous activity, and even then—" He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Colt felt like the ground had opened beneath his feet. How long, I cannot say for certain. Could be months, could be years. "But you need to prepare yourself, Mr. Chambers. Her heart is not going to get stronger." For the first time since his father died, Colt cried, sitting alone in his office with his head in his hands. The thought of losing Emma was unbearable. She had been his partner, his love, his best friend for nearly 40 years. How was he supposed to go on without her? But when he pulled himself together and went to their bedroom, Emma was sitting up in bed looking surprisingly peaceful. "I know what the doctor told you," she said quietly. "He told me the same thing. Emma, I cannot lose you." "You are not losing me yet," she said firmly. "I am not ready to go anywhere, but Colt, when my time does come, I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living, not just existing, but really living. Spend time with the children and grandchildren. Work with the horses, Do all the things that bring you joy. Do not just give up because I am gone. I do not know if I can do that without you. Yes, you can. You are stronger than you think. You always have been." She reached out and took his hand. "Besides, I do not plan on going anywhere just yet. I have at least a few good years left in me." She was right. Emma defied the doctor's grim prognosis, living not months but years with her weakened heart. She moved slower and tired more easily, but her mind remained sharp and her spirit undimmed. Colt adjusted his life around her limitations, making sure she never overexerted herself, taking on tasks she used to handle himself. They had 5 more good years together, 5 years of quiet contentment and deep companionship. They saw more grandchildren born, celebrated more anniversaries, watched the ranch continue to thrive under Charlie and James' management. They took drives in the automobile Charlie bought in 1912, marveling at how much the world had changed since they were young. It was a morning in April of 1915 when Emma did not wake up. Colt had risen early as usual and was surprised to find her still in bed, she who had always been an early riser. He spoke her name, then touched her shoulder and knew immediately that she was gone. The grief was overwhelming, a physical pain in his chest that made it hard to breathe. But even through the anguish, Colt felt a strange sense of gratitude. Emma had not suffered. She had simply gone to sleep and not woken up, passing peacefully in the bed they had shared for 44 years. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over the county to pay their respects. Emma had touched so many lives through her teaching, her work with the church, her quiet acts of kindness over the years. Colt stood beside her grave with his children and grandchildren surrounding him, and listened to person after person talk about how Emma had helped them, taught them, inspired them. But what they did not know, what none of them could fully understand, was what Emma had been to him specifically. She had been his salvation, arriving at his ranch when he was drowning in chaos and confusion, bringing order and purpose and love. She had taken a lonely, struggling rancher and shown him what life could be when you had a true partner. The house felt impossibly empty without her. Colt found himself expecting to hear her voice, to see her working at the desk or reading in her favorite chair. He kept fresh flowers on her grave and visited every Sunday without fail. True to his promise, though, he did not give up. He continued to work with the horses, something he had always loved. He spent time with his grandchildren, teaching them about ranching and telling them stories about their grandmother. He attended church and social events, maintaining the connections Emma had always valued. But he was lonely in a way he had never been before. After 44 years of partnership, half a lifetime of being part of a unit, being alone again felt wrong, like he was missing a limb. It was Charlie who found him one day, sitting in the office staring at the desk where Emma used to work. "Dad, are you all right?" Colt looked up at his eldest son. "I am all right, son. Just remembering." "Tell me," Charlie said, sitting down across from him. So Colt told him the whole story from the beginning, about the blood on the ledger and his desperation to find help. About Emma riding out to assess his books and agreeing to take on the impossible task. About how their daily work sessions had turned into friendship and then love. About the proposal in the meadow and the decades of partnership that followed. "I hired her to fix my books," Colt said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought numbers were my problem. I thought if I could just get the finances sorted out, everything would be fine. But Emma showed me that what I was really missing had nothing to do with numbers at all. I was missing her. I was missing love and partnership and someone to share my life with. The books were just an excuse for her to walk into my life." Charlie was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know what Mom told me once? She said marrying you was the best decision she ever made." She said you gave her adventure and purpose and a family she adored. You made her just as happy as she made you, Dad. I hope so. I tried to. You did. We all saw it. The way you looked at each other, even after all those years, it was like you were still courting. That is what I want with Mary, what we are trying to build. You and Mom showed all of us what marriage should be. Colt felt tears on his cheeks. She was everything, Charlie, everything. I know, Dad, I know. Colt lived another 5 years after Emma's death, years spent surrounded by family and the land they had built together. He never remarried, never even considered it. Emma had been his great love, his once-in-a-lifetime partner, and the thought of trying to replace her was absurd. He died peacefully in his sleep in March of 1920, just a few weeks shy of his 70th birthday. They buried him beside Emma in the Placerville Cemetery, under a headstone that read, "Together Forever." The ranch continued for generations after them, just as they had hoped. Charlie's children and grandchildren ran it, then their children after them. The Chambers Ranch became an institution in the county, known for quality cattle and ethical business practices. And always, the family told the story of how it all began, with a rancher who could not keep his books and a schoolteacher who came to help, only to discover that what they really needed was each other. The leather-bound ledgers that Emma had so carefully organized in that first summer sat in the ranch office for decades, a testament to where it all started. Later generations would sometimes take them out and flip through the pages, marveling at Emma's neat handwriting and systematic organization, at the transformation from chaos to order. But the real legacy was not in those ledgers or in the financial success of the ranch. It was in the example Colt and Emma set, showing their children and grandchildren and all who came after what a true partnership looked like. They taught that strength comes not from going it alone, but from finding someone who complements you, who shores up your weaknesses while celebrating your strengths. They showed that sometimes the problem you think you have is not the real problem at all. Sometimes you are focused on numbers when what you are really missing is love. Sometimes you are trying to fix the books when what you really need to fix is your heart. And they proved that when you find that person, that partner who fits with you perfectly, who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway, you hold on tight and never let go. Because that kind of love, that kind of partnership, is rarer than gold and more valuable than any fortune. In the end, Colt Chambers had been right that day in the meadow when he proposed to Emma. The best thing he ever did was hire her to fix his books. Not because of anything she did with the numbers, but because it brought her into his life and gave them both the chance to find what they had been missing all along: each other.